Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Supernatural, the season premiere of Legacies, as well as the latest episode of Evil. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I had to say about the season premiere of Supernatural, you can skip to what I had to say about the season premiere of Legacies and/or the latest episode of Evil. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the season premiere of Supernatural. A great premiere, great way to kind of kick off this final season. Obviously, all hell's broken loose, which is interesting to say in many different regards. Because if I remember correctly, that was literally the title of like the season 2 finale. Well, the two-part season 2 finale, right? All hell's broken loose. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. Regardless, it's kind of interesting. I don't know what I was kind of expecting. I mean, obviously it's going to pick up right where the season 14 finale ended off, but like them surrounded by essentially what is essentially zombies. And I'm like, I like the very like Night of the Living Dead type of, vibe. They have, Cassio grabbing Jack's body and they're running for it. It's like, holy crap, what are we going to do? If we go out there, we're going to get ripped apart. We stay in here, we're going to starve. And Cassio being like, well, you'll starve. I won't. It's like, well, good for you, Cass. Good for you that you won't. And then, it's so interesting, and because I was so curious about it too, because it's like, oh, are all these particular people back from the dead? Because I thought that would be interesting. It's like, wait, so are these specific people from souls from hells, and they got back to their bodies? It's like, no, they just jumped into the latest body. So it's like a little interesting aspect of the zombie. I mean, that's exactly how the whole Night of the Living Dead thing worked too. I'm not that familiar with it because it's been like, I've only seen bits and pieces. I don't think I've ever seen the entire movie, but that's how like the zombieism works, right? Like it was like spirits inhabiting the dead bodies. That's how. So I think it literally is pulling from that. But regardless, I'm going on a bit of a tangent. But the real surprise was the fact is that, well, for one, the fact is that Dean says what he says about like Jack didn't deserve that, which is, I know it's interesting considering everything that went down in the finale. You were ready to put the kid down, but at the same time, it's like, no, but even then it's like, that would have been at least some merciful version. Like what God did was kind of pretty brutal. You basically burned him from the inside out. So that adds an extra layer of just super messed up. But then it's like on top of that, it turns out a demon possessed his body, which is kind of interesting because it's like, wow. I mean, I guess because as powerful as Jack is, literally the child of an archangel, you'd be able to possess the body. Because it's like, the thing is, it's not like, oh, this is like some like body he's possessing like an angel typically would, or even like an archangel like Lucifer. Like obviously he was possessing Nick's body, but it's like, no, this is straight up his body. But I guess because at the same time, you have to remember the fact is he is half human. So that aspect of it probably makes it so that he can be possessed. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Does that work on if Sam and Dean died, like their bodies could never be possessed because they're still marked with that, the thing that keeps them from ever being possessed. So no one could ever possess their body. Well, doesn't Jack have that? I mean, I guess it was never a concern of his because he's an archangel. He can never be, the child of an archangel. I don't remember that ever coming up. Maybe it did. If it did, let me know in the comments down below because I don't remember that ever being a situation that came up. Once again, going into tangent, but it's like, holy crap, a demon's possessing his body. He's like, hey, I'd give you the proof, but no eyes. And he goes over and picks up some sunglasses. Like, this is my way to blend in and whatnot. So that was interesting. He ends up, getting rid. He didn't kill all of them. He basically knocked all of the souls out of those bodies they had reanimated. That was interesting. It was actually really interesting hearing him kind of dive into like hell's situation later on. I thought that was kind of fascinating. Basically, it's like, oh, how many souls are in hell? It's like, oh, about 2-3 billion souls. It's like, oh, okay. That's interesting. And on top of all that, because like I said, hell's situation, we haven't tapped into that since Asmodeus back in season 13. I think it's a lot because like nothing last season actually dealt with hell directly. That's why I was kind of thinking that's interesting. Like, yeah, there was no hints of like what the hierarchy was like in hell now since Asmodeus was dealt with. So other than that, like, this is our look into it, because it turns out Home Dude is like a torturer, which I love that they kind of bring this back to Dean. He's like, I didn't want to bring this up in front of other people. I'm like, don't tell me you're a fan. He's like, oh, I'm a fan. I'm like, right, yep, because Dean tortured souls back, like, when he was in that period between season 3's finale and season 4, when he was in hell. Like, obviously he said he fought it for a long time, and even Dean, obviously, that I like that we are doing that, bringing a lot of storylines like that back full circle, because it's like, yo, I was actually there. Like, you were, ooh. Like, no one did work like you. It was like, it wasn't even work. It wasn't just torture. It was art. It was like, obviously, days that, like, obviously that stayed with Dean for a long, long time. Like, what he did back then, it's like he broke eventually. And that, that always, I think, still weighs on him. Even after all this time, he's like, that was a long time ago. But the fact is, he still has that look on his face like, shut up. Don't talk about that time, But regardless, it was actually interesting when they talked about it too. He was like, oh wait, you said literally all the doors to hell open. And he brought up something I didn't even think about. He's like, does that include the cage? I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I mean, and it's a storyline that we have not touched in forever. I want to say season 6 might have been the last time we talked about it, because that was around, because remember, Sam's soul was in the cage with Lucifer and Michael, and he was kind of basically their punching bag in between this, like, in between this essentially sibling rivalry. So there's that whole thing. And then there's that, which makes me think, oh, we're going to bring back Adam. That's a storyline we have not touched in forever. I think the last time they touched that, it was like an alternate reality or whatever, where Adam was killed ahead of time or something like that. I think that's the last time Adam was referenced. It was like an alternate world, or it wasn't this apocalypse world thing. It was like something earlier in the series where they like ended up referencing the fact that he was killed ahead of time to make sure that he wouldn't become Michael's vessel or something like that. Regardless, it was something like that. I don't remember the details exactly. Like I said, it was a couple years ago. But that means we can bring that back. Especially because it's like, oh, come on. Michael, he wouldn't hold a grudge, right? It's like, oh. Which is interesting if they end up having to deal with this Michael, if they literally just dealt with their Michael, the Michael from Apocalypse World. So that'd be interesting. But it'd also be neat if he did come back in Adam's body, because, whereas Dean was like the right fit for a... as a host, Adam served a purpose as well. He was a quote unquote bastard child, to an extent, but he was still, serviceable as a vessel. So that could be something we deal with. That's, which I'm wondering what role would he play. I mean, we saw, because that was Michael from an Apocalypse World, but that Michael and this Michael probably think on the same wavelength. I'm curious what he would think about, like, oh, what your dad's doing to this world, that basically he set this all in motion. I mean, hell, what would Lucifer think? It begs question. The big question, what about the angels? What are they doing about this? I mean, granted, there's only literally a handful of them left. Literally less than a dozen. And there was a whole thing of like, oh, trying to make more. That never came about. So I'm curious. And I think this season, and like I said, everything kind of coming full circle, we're going to see a lot of familiar faces, because Sam and Dean pull up to a car. They're like, wait, this looks like a Lady in White situation. It's like, yeah, there might be, but it's like, no, I think this might be our literal Lady in White. It's like, we sent her back to hell. It's like, yeah, with a whole bunch of other people. It's like, that's, to me, is going to be this thing of like this season of like, we're going to be playing some of the greatest hits. I love that they brought this back, because it's like, I mean, Supernatural, like, and I brought this up before, Supernatural is notorious for bringing back stuff you haven't thought about in years and just hitting you with like, wait, what? I've literally referenced stuff where it's like, you haven't talked about that in years. What was it? Patience's grandmother. They brought her back after, like, she hadn't been in the show since season 1, I think. I'd referenced that, like, was that last season or the season before? Like, regardless, it's stuff like that. So it's like, I mean, it wasn't just season 1. This was their first case in the show. And it's like, bringing that back full circle like that, it's nuts. So that's dope. They're basically, the whole plan is to lock all the ghosts, seal them in a particular town. None can get in, none can get out. But obviously but it's like a mile radius thing, and there's a town nearby, so they're trying to evacuate all the people. Obviously, like, we see that there are some victims of this situation. We don't know how many ghosts are actually, like, over the course of the events, we see at the very least 4 there, but beyond that, we don't know. I mean, because Sam had looked into it, he was like, nothing else had gone beyond. So, like, even if it is an apocalypse, I mean, it is literally an apocalypse level thing, but we don't know how far it's reached because things haven't started rolling out yet. It seems like this town is the first one, but it's the precursor of what's to come. So that was kind of interesting, like, many different evil spirits, not just possessing dead bodies trying to find one, but also, just doing their thing on their own without any, bodies or whatever. So I think that's going to be a fascinating situation to deal with. But I was so scared for that. I felt so bad because those girls who were like hanging out together. I think that's supposed to be Bloody Mary, isn't it? Or is it just supposed to be something like, I would assume just because of the blood and because they've dealt with Bloody Mary before, haven't they? So is that the same person? I don't know. I think one of them, the lady in the black in the axe, that's supposed to be Lizzie Borden, right? And I think the clown's supposed to be John Wayne Gacy. I think. I could be 100% wrong. But regardless, I felt bad those girls weren't able to be saved, but fortunately, the mother and child, there was some part of my mind that kept thinking, they're either both dead or one of them's dead and you just don't know it. Kind of similar to Trisha Helfer's character, where she was kind of stuck in that cycle but didn't realize she was dead. That situation, which that's even me pulling back another situation, because that was back in season 1 as well, but regardless, that's what I was kind of wondering. I kept thinking the entire time, that little girl's dead, isn't she? She's a ghost. That's why. Because it seemed like everything was going for the mom and not her necessarily. I mean, later on, I was thinking like, he actually got to him and she's the ghost now. That's what my mind is. But it's like, no, they turned out to be okay. I love when Sam and Cass showed up. Look, obviously, Cass comes over and he heals Sam, and she's like, wait, what? How are you doing that? It's like, I'm an angel. You're an angel? And that was a ghost? And it's like, you? He's like, I'm just a normal dude. It's like, what about that wound you got when you shot God? You shot God? It's a long story. It's like, why are you having these that's a conversation you shouldn't have brought up in front of anyone. It's like, yeah, we're saying that so casually, like, oh yeah, right. We would have to fill you in on it. You just, never mind. It's just kind of an interesting thing. Which, that is an interesting thing in itself. Cass couldn't heal the wound. And Dean even checks it later on. There's no exit wound because it's a supernatural bullet, but obviously there's been supernatural bullets that still had an exit wound, but this situation is a little different. I'm assuming it's because the bullet is not in obviously it's not in Sam, because it's the bullet reflects like whatever's done. So you shoot someone like Chuck and end up hurting him, the same thing's going to happen obviously like it did to Sam. I'm assuming the bullet's still inside of Chuck. I'm wondering, could he take it out, or maybe he's leaving it in because it's like, oh, Sam. Maybe because it was something of his own creation, it can't actually hurt him. It's kind of like his powers are a double-edged sword. Like if you'd have took them and bounced them back at him, he could hurt himself. Like I think he's the only one that literally could, potentially, So that in itself is an interesting situation, So I do love that they do, Dean does call up Rowena, which is like, yes! Like obviously there's aspects of Rowena's story we know, like what Billy has said it's kind of Rowena's destiny to die by Sam's hand. So that's something we're still going to be diving into. But obviously Rowena, I think, is going to play a big role this season. I think her ultimate death, like I still think her death is going to be like a sacrifice where Sam has to kill her for like to kind of basically save everything. I thought it'd be in particular related to Jack, but maybe not. It still could be, but we'll see. I thought it was more so about like giving Jack back his soul or something like that, or stopping him, whatever the case may be. I thought it was kind of more in the lines of that, but still, I think that's something we're going to obviously deal with heavily this season. So, but regardless, getting back to the gunshot wound, I'm curious about that because the moment like Cass tried to heal it, like he saw something. It was almost kind of like an evil. I don't know whether that was something like of the future, or was that supposed to be something of the past? Like it looked like to me like it's supposed to represent like, it's like, because Cass is like, it's an energy I've never felt before. I'm wondering, is that going to be something where it like ends up corrupting Sam and turning, like could it be like slowly but surely he's going to turn into a demon, kind of basically slowly and surely like Dean was. I'm wondering, is it supposed to be or not? So well, because I don't know. I'm curious to see what that ends up being. Like, is it going to be similar to the whole Dean situation or not? But regardless, because that's what it seemed like. It might have been like some future event, or was that supposed to be something from the past or something? I was wondering if that was supposed to be stuff back from when he had no soul or something like that. Is it kind of like the evil inside of him kind of bubbling to the surface? I don't know what to make of that, but that's an interesting thing. Luckily, I mean, it's not well, sadly, there were a few victims, but luckily, it seems like they were able to get most of the town out. That's gotta be interesting as a demon, kind of telling the ghost lady, "Like, whoa, 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 calm down. Like, you don't have to." Well, the lady in white situation of like, "Oh, calm down. I'm not buddies with this dude." That's gotta suck in its own right. Obviously, he asks questions about like, "Oh, whose body is this anyway?" He plans on getting a new body eventually. Obviously, Cass is having a hard time dealing with this because it's just a reminder that Jack's not there, and it's like, here you are defiling his body and everything. I do appreciate. The fact that you make a reference like that, you kind of get, like, I know it's me reading too much into it, but it's like calling him Crowley Jr. and everything makes you go, you going to do something about that? The whole Crowley thing? Like, I hope so. I've kind of hinted that, like, I wanted to do something with that because it's the final season. We can start pulling some strings, do some, crazy, wacky stuff to kind of bring back some faces we ain't seen in a while. I'd love a certain Crossroad Demons to make an appearance. I've kind of referenced that before. Regardless, getting into the whole grand scheme of things. Which also I'm curious, is there ever going to be anything about the apocalypse world? They're ever going to circle back to that? I mean, that world's pretty much abandoned. There's nothing to it anyway. But, that was like literally the last of humanity that managed to come over to this world. The whole point was that they were going to go back eventually, but I'm curious. Because it also makes you think of Bobby as well as Charlie, that whole situation. It's kind of interesting. I've been seeing Felicia, because obviously Felicia Day's been kind of going around promoting her recent book. So I don't know if she's actually talked about if she's in any of this final season or not, or even if she's going to be in the upcoming season of The Magicians. Regardless, once again, whole bunch of tangents. But other than that, it's an interesting situation to find themselves in, because now it's like, well, obviously there's still a little bit of bad blood between Cass and Dean. It's like, yeah, we're dealing with this situation, but I'm still not going to forget literally everything playing out the way it did. It's a whole complicated situation in itself, but it brought up something interesting where it's like, okay, because Dean is kind of like, well, what do we do? Because God is just, basically it makes, because Dean and Sam were at the very least like, hey, at least everything that we've done, everything we've lost, we've ever sacrificed has been for the greater purpose of, like, at the very least we can save lives, and that means something. But now it's like, basically God has made it seem like everything was never your choice, that you were literally, as he says, mice in a maze. We can turn left or we can go right, doesn't matter, because we're still in a maze. We're still playing his game. It's all from the very beginning. Everything in our lives, we thought maybe we had free will, but it's all been part of his twisted game since the very, very beginning. Everything was meant to go the way he wanted it to. But the fact of the matter is, it's something Sam brought up I thought was kind of interesting, where it's like, God's going to move on. He did it with Apocalypse World. He did it with countless other worlds. He's going to move on and do his thing. The fact of the matter is, which I'm still surprised we've never tackled like other worlds, like other than like Apocalypse World and the Bad Place. Like those are the only other worlds we've ever visited, which even that I'm like, what about Dark Kaya? Like you see her kind of in the opening kind of saying like, oh, stuff from last season, but it's like, is anything ever going to come about that? We know she's kicking it somewhere in this world. Like I said, this is going to be like the biggest, probably like every hunter around the world is going to get the notice about, be on the lookout. Shit's going down. I'm curious how much Sam and Dean are going to tell every hunter about what's going on. This might be a situation where they have to join forces with the British Men of Letters, because this is the apocalypse level of everything, because this is supposed to be the end. It's been the end before, but this is literally God saying it's going to be the end. So that adds a little more weight to it, because for him, it's like, oh, everything's kind of been part of a game. I'm so interested to see how things play out. This has been his favorite television show, but now it's like the gloves are off, his hands off of like, oh yeah, this world burns, it burns, so that's something. But that's, like I said, circling back to the point I was trying to make, is that Sam was like, the fact is he's going to move on, which the question is he going to move on? He's taken an interest in you guys before now. You can make the argument, which is so interesting, the parallels between this, because obviously spoilers for Preacher kind of went down a similar route to a certain extent, which is interesting. Obviously there's the graphic novel that's been out for a long time, but obviously I'm not that familiar with the comic book except for a little bit here and there, but obviously like I'm more familiar with the TV show, so it's interesting to make the parallels there. Obviously like, oh, God's starting over because like, oh, he's grown bored of everything because they failed, well, not failed him, but just more so like, the entertainment value is over, you turn it against me. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna move on. But is he gonna move on because he's invested, as when you can actually break the fourth wall in and say like, hey, I've invested 15 years into this. quote unquote property. You think I'm just going to abandon it like that? It's like, no, I'm going to be a little more hands on, you know. So I'm curious about to see where things kind of go on that route. But Sam is like, the fact of the matter is, we win this battle, we're free. Like, we're free of God. He's going to all be off doing his own thing. This world will be in our hands from now on, that people's choices will matter. So it's like everything going forward will be our choices. There's no manipulation from him. So that means it's time to get to work. You know, this is the apocalypse amongst all apocalypse. You know, what's one more apocalypse? But like I said, this might be the end all be all one, you know, above all others, you know. So let's see if the Winchesters can, you know, pull out one more before, you know, things end. And I'm so, like I said, this is a nice direction. It brings up some interesting storylines. Like I said, this whole dude possessing Jack's body thing, like, that's going to be interesting, kind of continuing that and see where that ends up taking us. And obviously, you know, they haven't always had the best of luck of trusting demons. Hasn't always worked out, but it's led to some interesting situations, like the Crowley, like, kinship that they kind of built, the complicated relationship that was. So maybe you kind of get a little hint of that in this particular relationship. Either way, I'm very, very excited to see what this final season has in store for us. I'm ready to kind of, you know, take this final trip, you know, and see where we end up at the end of the, you know, goalpost. I honestly don't know where I was going to go with that. I started that analogy and it kind of trailed off. Like I said, either way, I'm very excited to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. And now moving on to the season premiere of Legacies, a great season premiere. So many interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, it's kind of interesting, obviously, seeing kind of the outside world, because a lot is still kind of happened. Obviously, we have Alaric being booted from his job as, you know, principal and everything at the school, headmaster, which is interesting because it makes you wonder. I think Hope being there would have been the thing that tilted that scale, because he even brings it up to Dorian because there were secret votes and everything. He thought at the very least he would have had Dorian on his side, but if Hope was there, she would have been the one to be willing to give him a chance. But obviously she's not there to kind of be that tilting force in his direction. So there's that whole situation. Plus Raphael is going through what he's doing, so that's another like not in his direction as well. So it's just more complications in that route. So, and obviously we see how he's kind of dealing with it, because obviously there's the whole situation with his daughters. He's got to deal with the merger and everything. But on top of that, it's like this whole Malivore thing. It's like there's something there, like much like Landon, it's like there's a piece missing, because Hope is important to Alaric. So just like Landon's kind of feeling off in that regard, I think so is Alaric, to the point he's growing facial hair and stuff like that. And even like Lizzie and Josie are like joking about it, which is interesting. I think over the course of the entire series, that includes everything Vampire Diaries related, he's never had facial hair before. The actor who's played Alaric, so this is like weird to see him like full, you know, beard and mustache. It's just, I don't know, it's just not, he's always been clean cut and shaven. Like, and I feel like, not unless I'm misremembering, but regardless. So, and since we're all talking about Josie and Lizzie, obviously, you know, it's at first it's like summer vacation, so everyone's kind of going home. There was even that cute moment where like I think a whole bunch of girls are together. They're like saying their goodbyes to each other, and this girl's parents are there waiting, like hands in open arms, and she walks past them. So it's that thing of like, it's such an interesting thing. It's an element that doesn't get touched on a lot, because obviously these are all teenagers. Obviously they're all supernatural teenagers. And obviously it stems from the fact of like, okay, so what about their parents? We know about MG's complicated situation with his family, how they feel about him being a vampire. But what about everyone else? It's like, oh, my parents, like maybe I'm a witch. How do my parents feel about that? Maybe they're not witches themselves, but you typically would think, you know, that would flow in the family. What about werewolves? I mean, it might not even just be the fact is my parents aren't something supernatural, because in some cases they're not, but I feel like in a lot of cases they probably are. But it's probably more so like, I don't want to be around you, because these teenagers we're dealing with, it's just something that never really gets 100% dealt with in the Vampire Diaries necessarily. But he's these are teenagers who are just coming into their supernatural side, whereas everyone else, like, you know, whatever the case may be with the Vampire Diaries situation of like, you know, the real ages and stuff like that of like Stefan and Damon, it's like they've been kicking it as their ages for a long time, you know, so they've kind of matured a little bit more. These are just straight up teenagers, no matter, like I said, no matter what their supernatural circumstances may be. So there was that, but there's so much, because obviously, Lizzie and Josie are still worrying about the merge, trying to figure that whole situation out. Obviously, Lizzie's like, come on, Josie, you shouldn't spend time there. But Josie's like, nah, I got to look after Dad. Got to make sure that basically he doesn't fall apart, because everything's kind of going wrong for him right now. He lost his job. Plus, he's dealing with he's diving headfirst into this whole Malivore situation. So there's that. I'm going to be skipping around a lot, but I love that this episode, the Kai thing got dropped in the middle. I was like, of course your dad's not going to talk about Kai at all. I mean, like, in the grand scheme of things, if you don't remember where Kai is, he got locked up by Bonnie. Bonnie, like, dropped him in that dimension or whatever, where he's literally stuck by himself. Because every time Kai pops up, he's a literal piece of shit. He came back from hell, was still kind of being a piece of shit. I think he tried to pretend like he was better, that he could change. I mean, the argument is that, hey, he tried before. He tried to be like, oh, I can be the good guy, but it didn't work out. No one was willing to give him the chance. So he went full-blown bad, and obviously he did that again when he came back. So that's those whole circumstances. So, which obviously Josie was telling Lizzie, like, we should not even go down that route. The fact is, we're bringing up Kai is like, yo, he's going to pop up at some point this season. He has to, because, and even Alaric said it, he's the last option, because he's literally been the only one around that's been through it. Because remember, there was the siblings, but both died. There was the one that Tyler was dating for a little bit. I don't even remember the actress's name. I think her name is Penny Mitchell, who played the sister, but there was a brother. Like, he ended up becoming the dominant twin, if I remember correctly, because I know Penny ended up, her character ended up dying, but it's been a while. So, but Kai's like the only living option to know all there is to know about it. But the thing is, he is the sociopath that he is. The fact is, he did kill his entire family. He did lead to the death of his sister, your biological mom, which, hey, they met pseudo bio mom last season, but still. That's still kind of hard to, probably hear that, like, oh, he's the reason behind all that. So it's like, yeah, we don't want to go down that lane unless we have to. It is the last resort. And I think they're ultimately going to have to go to him, but you can't trust Kai. Kai's always going to look after his self-interest. He might even try to take this merging situation. It's like, whoa, you're Joe's kids, right? Oh, wow. So you do your merging situation, or maybe he'll decide to kill one of them and merge with them, because it's like, maybe it'll count on some level because my twin ended up having a kid of their own, in a surrogate way, that, it'll still maybe count like merging with Joe. Maybe it'll still count. Maybe, I don't know. Regardless, that's an interesting route to go down as well. I also thought it was kind of neat kind of progression in Lizzie's story, because for Lizzie, she's saying like, oh, me and mom are having this great time, but obviously that was her lying, because she's trying to be like, put up this front. But for her, she's going to doctors, she's going to therapy sessions, she's going to like shamans and stuff, because she's trying to fix herself. And you can make the argument she might be technically going down the Kai right of like, the Kai route. I don't know why I said that weird like I did. Regardless, she like, obviously, like, Lizzie's kind of a bit unstable, and she's working on that, but there might be more to it that might not necessarily be 100% on her to be able to fix. It might just be kind of something that, it comes up in the family every once in a while. It might be like a genetics type of thing, a more magical genetic that passes down into Geminis. It could be, so, because like I said, we see it with Kai, but that's something I didn't even really think about. Like, Josie could be going down the Kai right. I mean, not Josie. Lizzie could be going down the Kai route. Did I say it again? Right? Route. I don't know. I keep saying right instead of route. Not unless regardless, I'm being an idiot right now. I'm sorry. I can't talk right now. The fact is, I feel like they've kind of hinted that she's going down that route. And the question is, like, who would be the dominant twin to win this thing if it came down to it? Hopefully it doesn't, but it seems like it almost seems like an inevitable thing. It's like, it's part of being in a Gemini. It's like it is what it is. So the question then becomes like, I get the feeling it's going to be Josie, but at the end, like, it's going to end up being Lizzie, because Josie will never want to do it. She kind of has that very passive nature, but also I think she'd rather her sister lived in herself. Which is interesting to say, because like obviously a lot of this episode kind of deals with death in a certain route, because and it's kind of interesting. The parallels between their situations. Obviously, Josie's dealing with this whole merge route, whereas Landon's dealing with having to live, but he kind of feels like there's something missing. Which she also brought up something interesting too. Like, I'm not that familiar with the Phoenix's myth, their lore, but I've never heard of a limit to how many times they come back, but you never know. Like, that might be something that's actually mixed in the lore, and even if it isn't, that could be something that Legacy messes around with. The fact is that there is, a limit to how many times they can come back, because Landon keeps killing himself over and over again, because it's like every time he's reaching that bridge of death, he remembers something. He's remembering hope, but he can't. The memories are there. He just can't quite grasp them. It's glimpses at a time. But obviously, both of them have been so focused on death to a certain extent that, Josie is suggesting, why don't we try and live? So that's kind of an interesting route. And I like that did bring them together. Because most of the time, Landon's kept to himself, because outside of the school, he doesn't have a home. The only home he had left was, Hope and Raphael. But now that's potentially gone, because Raph's stuck as, a werewolf, as a wolf. And, Landon's trying to be there for him and everything. So, and then eventually Raph leaves. And my thought process is exactly what Josie was saying, that he moved on. Because for me, it's like he saw how much time him and Josie were spending together. And it's like, oh my God, my bro is happy. If I stay here, he's just going to keep worrying about me, looking after me, rather than living his life. He's going to dedicate, because Raph's probably thinking to himself, it's like, even though he's a wolf, it's like there's still that human side of him that's like, no, eventually he's going to keep sacrificing so much of his life to look after me, and I can't ask him to keep doing that. So I'll leave. I'll do right by him in a sense, So I think that's the route which things are kind of going down. So there's that. We also got introduced to a new character who's played by Bianca. Is it? I'm blanking on how you pronounce her last name. It's like, is it Kajik? Because I feel like that might be it. Which is interesting. Obviously, I feel like there was something else I knew her from. I know Rules of Engagement is one thing I know her from, but I feel like there was something else in particular I knew her from, and I just can't place it. Regardless. Was it interesting? She was most recently in the first episode of The Unicorn, so I thought that was just kind of interesting. But it also seems like she has a badge. So it's like, is she a straight up cop? Is she a U.S. Marshal? What's that whole thing about? Which is interesting. That's definitely going to be interesting, because I guess she's the new cop in town. Because I guess it depends on the whole Matt situation. Because I doubt she knows about the supernatural. But the fact is, they introduce her. She's got the badge and everything. I'm like, you're going to be a recurring character. And what necessary regards? I don't know. I'm sure maybe Alarica will end up getting close to her. And then it's going to be the whole thing of I'm going to have to keep that boundary between the people who know and the people who don't know about the supernatural stuff. Maybe she's someone brought in by Matt. Maybe she was moving to this area. She's becoming a cop. Matt trying to keep her in the dark about the supernatural. It depends on how he wants to, potentially go down that route. Regardless, there's that whole situation. So there's that. All of that's happening. Meanwhile, we have Hope and Clark inside of Malivore. Now, that was an interesting situation, because I didn't actually expect this to go inside of Malivore at all. I was thinking it was just going to be nope, Hope's not there at all. But it's like, nope, we're seeing her inside of Malivore. It's not like she's completely gone, because she thought, hey, I'd be at peace, because she thought she killed Malivore. Now, what was interesting is because for her, her explanation is because I'm not a true tribrid, because I never activated my vampire side, because I've never died. I was like, that's interesting. So you're kind of in that weird... what would be that word I'm looking for? I think purgatory is kind of the word I was kind of thinking of being between a hybrid and a tribrid. Regardless, it is, but I like Clark explaining that the reason why we're meeting is actually kind of a weird thing, because normally anything inside of Malivore that's trapped are in invisible cells. They're in their own little sectioned off cells, but the fact is we're meeting means that you're turning things inside out. Malivore isn't sitting right because you kind of throwing off the balance, because as Hope kind of talks about it later on, she's poison to him, because regardless of her tribrid side not being fully activated, it's still there in her genetics, it's in her genes, it's in her blood. So even if it's not fully activated, it's still enough to make him sick to his stomach, essentially. So it was kind of interesting, Clark being there to help her and everything. And it's like, yo, we should be friends and stuff like that. And she's not really listening to him. It's like, oh, you're so stubborn, you're so hard-headed. And for her, I forgot what it was he said exactly to her, but she turned it around on him and it's like, yeah, this coming from the guy that spent his entire life failing daddy. and it's just, you see him get so pissed. He's like, you know, I love her like snappy retorts towards him. It was so good. Even putting a spell on him to be like, yeah, so doing a mimic thing again. So she ends up walking away, forcing him to walk away. It's like, we'll never talk again, we'll never be partners or whatever. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. But he's actually there and helping and everything. I was like, oh, maybe he's not a complete and utter D-bag. Obviously, he's wanting this because it's like, hey, I want out of here too. But hey, at least he's showing a decent side of things. But regardless of all of that, it was really interesting because Hope was like, I know I can't trust you. And she puts like a truth spell on him. And so basically he admits, because she thinks like, every time I use magic, the portal opens. But then like, you hold on to me and everything. She's like, something's not right. Because the moment the portal appeared, what did he do? He immediately instinctually grabbed her. And she was like, wait, what the hell was that? Part of me was thinking like, oh, that's because he cares about her and he's worried about her. Even the fact is that Hope was like, why are you even afraid in here? Like, because there's everything that's been captured by Malivore is in there. They end up running into a dragon. She's like, I think that's a gargoyle. Me and my friends had taken down one before. Because it's not just the one. There's not just one of every species in there. I'm sure he's literally taken every creature within each species. So like every dragon that's ever existed is probably in there. Every gargoyle that's ever existed, that type of situation. I don't think there's just one of every in particular supernatural creature, even the more mystical ones that seem to have been lost to time and obviously lost to Malivore. But when it comes down to it, you know, Hope now knowing the truth is like, oh, I'm gonna get out of here. Because basically he was trying to hitch a ride off of, you know, Hope. It's like, oh, when she gets sucked out of there, like I'm gonna grab onto her and get out too. But every time he grabs on, the portal closes because it's like, oh, I'm trying to get her out because she's making me sick. But son, you stay in. You're still in timeout, son. I gotta punish you for failing me over and over again. So there's that whole situation. So on top of that, you know, you finally have Hope getting out, which I'm like, okay, so Hope gets out. I'm like, yeah, but that's going to be weird and awkward because I'm like, yeah, when everyone, you know, it's like the whole thing of like, oh yeah, like it's going to be that thing of like when everyone remembers and everything, there's still the Landon and Josie situation of something being there. It's like, that's going to lead to some complications. But then it gets revealed like no one remembers Hope. And I'm like, right. Well, I forgot what she was, but there's the plant lady back in season 1. She got reunited with the vampire that she was in love with. But even though she came back from Malivore, he didn't remember her because no matter what the circumstances are, like that memory of you is still gone regardless, you know? So no one remembers her. And I didn't even click on my mind, which makes this whole situation even more tragic because she runs into Dorian. It's like, how do you know my name? It's like, because it says your name there. So I was like, yeah. Then she returns to Landon just in time to see him and Josie kissing because it's like, geez, it just couldn't be more of a dagger through the heart with that whole situation. Because obviously, like, you know, they're both happy at being around each other. They've been happier now having each other. But now, you know, and the sad thing is their happiness kind of means Hope's unhappiness because she has to see, because obviously she cares deeply for Landon. She is in love with him, but obviously he doesn't remember her. So she ends up going to the bus stop because it's like, for her, there's no place here for her anymore because no one remembers her. Even if she went back to her family, you know, they wouldn't remember her. So it's kind of like, well, you know, what's the point? So she was going to the bus stop, and I like that she created the fake Landon again, and he's there to kind of be like, you know, I'm still a manifestation of your subconscious and stuff like that. And she's like, because she's like, I just want to stare into your eyes, and he's like, oh, they are pretty, aren't they? She's like, the real Landon wouldn't say that, but what was it he said exactly? He was like, I'm kind of, I forgot what the exact word he used, but he's basically saying I'm kind of remixing it a little bit, so, you know, sue me because I'm not the real Landon and all that. But it is that thing of like, you know, for Hope, I think it's something she's always kind of struggled with because I think on some level, because the thing is she can kind of like, I think, understand where Clark is coming from because Clark is trying to do everything he can to get away from his family because, I mean, his dad in particular, because he doesn't want to be associated with his dad and stuff like that, which Hope is kind of on the opposite spectrum to a certain extent because it's interesting because obviously like most of Klaus's family could not wait to get the hell away from him. Obviously, Elijah being a special case, but everyone else was kind of afraid of him, was like, oh, we need to get the hell away from him. But at the same time, you know, Hope always wanted to run to her father. So like Clark and her are kind of on opposite spectrums of like she'd do anything to run to her dad, which it seemed like her dad was trying to run away from her for her own protection and whatnot, you know. So there's that whole situation. So. But regardless, like for her, she probably thinks like, oh, everyone's happy. It's like, look at Landon. He is happy. Regardless of the whole Josie situation, he's happy, and who am I to basically come in and kind of take away that happiness no matter what my circumstances may be. So as she's getting ready to leave, we see a bus get flipped over by another supernatural creature. It's like, oh, Malivore is back to his old. He's not completely shut down. The fact of the matter is he's still sending stuff out. Obviously, the school is not safe, so Hope's probably is going to stick around, but she's probably, because even the fake landing was like, if I find out that you were right down the road and I didn't even know, like, at the very least, we made the promise that we weren't going to lie to each other anymore. So the fact of the matter is, don't do this now. Like, you know, it'd be worse if you didn't tell me, like, hey, you were back, you were alive again and everything. You know, and the time came, you know, and everyone's memories eventually did come back, because we do know that Landon hasn't completely forgotten her. It'll probably still be a while, but when they meet again, it'll probably be like, wait, do I know you? Like, there's going to be something there. He's going to feel it and know it, but not quite be able to 100% grasp it is what I'm thinking. But still, this whole Malivore thing, I was actually kind of surprised, because I was thinking like, oh, maybe this is the end for Malivore, because I feel like more often than not always, but the Vampire Diaries, this universe doesn't always have the same main antagonist, like seasonally. So this might be another shift that Legacies has, where it's like the main antagonist shifting over. Because usually it's like, even like the Vampire Diaries, like it's like every season was like a new main antagonist in some shape or form. It was even interesting because, you know, Hope was like, oh my God, this is hell. And, you know, Clark was like, no, there's no such thing. At least I'm not aware of, which is like, it's funny because you remember the whole, oh my God, what's his name? He's like from the final season of the Vampire Diaries. He's the psychic that sent the sirens out. What was his name? He created like a psychic hell for people. That dude, I'm blanking on his name, and it's going to bother the crap out of me. But other than that, like, that's kind of like the closest version of hell that we're aware of in this continuity. So it was just kind of interesting that he made a reference, like saying that, like, maybe, I don't know if there's quite exist one, and, you know, regardless, I'm going on a whole tangent, but, yeah, like, typically, they don't always, like, obviously, I think Catherine might be one of the few exceptions, because she's always kind of been a threat all across the board, so she's literally one of the few antagonists that's stayed consistent throughout, like, the Vampire Diaries. But even though the originals kind of moved on from one antagonist to the next type of thing, you know? So this might be one of the few, because this is like a back-to-back of like, because Malivore is in an interesting position, because it is multiple antagonists in one until it fully comes back in whatever shape or form, which I'm assuming it's going to have some kind of human form when we get reintroduced to it in this series potentially, because you know it's going to get free. But what's interesting is, you know, Clark is like, I was never the bad guy, but the fact of the matter is, Dad, you give me one more chance, I'll do it. I will be the bad guy. I will destroy Hope Michelson, the one thing in the world that can hurt you. And it seems like his dad's giving him the chance, but at the same time, there's someone going to the Mystic Falls Cemetery, and you're doing like a giant summoning or something. There's a giant sigil being burned into the ground. So it's like, is that connected to the Malivore thing? Or are we setting up a completely other and same antagonist going up at the same time? Was that something else that Malivore... Well, because the thing is, Malivore releases things one at a time. So if he's already releasing his son, why would he be... Because it seemed like something else, the thing that was attacking Hope is already being sent out. So how is he able to send out his son too? Has things changed for Malivore where it can send out more than one? Has it learned its lesson that I'm not sending out one at a time? I'm sending out a whole bunch at once, maybe? Or maybe that thing in particular isn't Malivore related. If it's letting Clark out, that thing might not be connected to Malivore. It might be connected to whoever the hell that is that went into the cemetery, which is like, is that a witch? Like, what's that all about? I have no idea. I am so excited to dive into this season, because I think it's going to hit us with just as many surprises as season one had. Jeez, I'm forgetting the other angle of this episode too. I feel like such an asshole. I forgot about the whole MG and Caleb thing. Now that was interesting. Caleb is like kind of welcoming him into the family, because it's like, yeah, his family's kind of assholes. I love the whole thing of naming their meat. It's like, oh, I've known this creature since, you know, it was born and everything. And MG's kind of like, that's messed up. You're up here cooking it now. And then later on, it's like they're drinking the blood, and he's like, oh yeah, was it Gertrude? And MG's looking at him like, wait, we're drinking Gertrude's blood? How much more messed up can this be? It's like, you're over there cooking it, and you're giving it a name, and it's adding too much, like, it's making this a little too personal that I'm eating something. He meets a girl, and her name is Kim, that he kind of like, hits it off with a little bit. And it's like, the moment he says that, the moment that happens, I'm like, that's going to be someone related to Caleb. He's not going to like it. The moment it's like, I met this girl. It's like, oh, really? You did? I'm like, that's going to be his sister, isn't it? It's like, yep. Haven't I told you so much about Kim? You know that Kim? Is like, wait, your sister Kim? It's like, yep. Now that's going to be interesting. I also love that moment if it's like, that's another vote for my creepy ass uncle. And his uncle just pops up, touches the show. My name's Earl. I was like, that is a little creepy that you just pop up out of nowhere like that. But regardless, Caleb is trying to make MG kind of live up his time and like, hey, you're having so much fun. This is going to be the best summer ever. Kind of turned out to be a bust though, because, well, he met someone nice and that ended up being Kim, but, Caleb was like, nah, he put a kibosh on that real quick. Like, yeah, you want to have fun? Yeah, just make sure that fun stays the hell away from my sister. So I guess he's protected, because it's also that weird thing of like, he's like, I want my family tree to branch out. The fact is, if, you're like my brother now, if I let you date my sister, puts in is this weird situation, like, nah. But also I think he is just probably like a very protective brother in a sense. So, but I doubt we're done with Kim. I think Kim's probably going to pop up and that's going to turn into a complicated thing with MG. Because Caleb's like, yo, I'm going to hook you up. I'm going to make this whole Lizzie thing happen. It's like, you said the no in the whole Lizzie thing. It's like, yeah, over the summer, we're going to make this the greatest semester ever. So, but I don't know if MG's necessarily down for that. Now that he's met Kim, maybe that's going to change things. Like, because things have changed a lot for a lot of people. So I'm interested to see where that kind of takes us on that front. Like I said, I get the feeling like Kim might pop up later on, and that's going to turn into like a little bit of a don't let Caleb know that this is happening or something's happening. I don't know. We'll see. Like I said, I feel like such an asshole that I completely let that slip my mind. So obviously, like I said, the new semester starting up with all of this happening. So, like, obviously, Hope's been away. Like, we know, like, she's been going the entire summer. So that's obviously, like, it started in June. So, like, she's been going, like, 3 months. But who knows how much time was spaced in between, like, season 1's finale. Because who knows, like, maybe season 1's finale could have been, like, March or something, or May. So regardless, I'm interested to dive into this season, see what is got in store for us, especially seeing what the next episode's got in store for us. I'm so excited. And now moving on to this week's episode of Evil. Another great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I brought this up previously in the last episode, but I thought this was such an interesting element of the show does continue from the new case that was kind of basically started up. I don't know, like, I don't know if that's necessarily something that's going to continue, but it's just kind of interesting that it just seems like, like at the end of the first episode, it's like, let's talk about this miracle. That miracle ended up being the second episode. Let's talk about demonic possession. That's what this episode ended up being about, a possession, which we'll get to that in a second. I just think that's kind of interesting. Why I say that is just because most shows, not all shows, but a couple shows will typically, be in a procedural situation of like, okay, like, it's never like, this is a cop show where this is the next case they work on. It's like, no, there are cases in between. This is the only story that we get. You get what I'm trying to say? So that's me going off on a little bit of a tangent. But it was interesting diving into this episode, learning that there are different forms of possession. I didn't know that. Like, they're categorized into 6 different forms, and they're kind of interesting to kind of dive into. Obviously, we're dealing with more so the 6th one, which I thought was kind of fascinating. But diving into this episode, really interesting on many different levels, because this is all about a woman named Patty. She's come talking about her boss. His name is Byron, and he's like a Broadway producer, played by none other than John Glover. I lost my mind. I was like, oh my God, one Lionel Luthor from Smallville. Interestingly enough, the most recent thing I saw him in, because I didn't know he was in this at all until I watched it, was Shazam. Obviously that's just, I talked about it at the time, but obviously the DC connection, that's interesting. But I just like, holy crap. Interestingly enough too, is the fact is that, it's kind of a spoilers, but Shazam kind of deals with the 7 deadly sins and how because he plays Mark Strong's character's father in the movie, how his story ends is connected to the 7 deadly sins. So it's just kind of interesting. Evil in that particular case, and now there's evil in this case. It's just interesting. But basically, it's like, apparently sweating blood is an example of possession. I forgot what like the second sign of it was, but apparently he's kind of a bit of an asshole. He's fired a whole bunch of over 60 some assistants in the past 6 months. He's been very volatile. Like, it just seems, at the end of the day, it seems like, hey, maybe he's just a straight up asshole. But then it turns out the bleeding from the neck thing is from hair plugs or something, because Ben, but like I said, Ben's always the biggest skeptic to be like, okay, I'm gonna find a rational explanation for this. Like I said, I thought that'd be Kristen, but Kristen, like I said, she straddles that line between of like believing and not believing, which I think is interesting. I also love the fact that she kind of like geeked out when it's like, wait, Byron, I love his plays and stuff like that. And Ben's looking back and forth between Patty and her being like, why is this conversation happening right now? Or don't we have a job to do? I just thought that was kind of neat. But obviously, it's something that didn't necessarily seem like possession necessarily. Obviously, that's why Kristen's being obviously brought into this case as well, of like trying to see what it is. But at the same time, it's like, okay, there's the hair plug thing, and then it seems like he's just a borderline narcissistic. But there's there's a cam in there to kind of monitor him, you know, and he's talking to himself. Well, in particular, he's talking to someone named Joe, and he's strangling them and such. And it's like, yo, what the hell is going on there? So it's like, okay, Kristen actually looks into it, and it's a method that was being taught of how to deal with your anger issues, to kind of personify it as a person and to literally choke it out. Literally, the dude that was kind of explaining this was literally doing exactly what Byron was doing. So that's what Kristen's initial, you know, understanding is, like, Joe is just a personification, because he's like, who is Joe and all of this stuff. So it leans in that direction until things start going, wait, what? Because you actually because she starts talking to Joe, and then Joe's voice actually resonates, and it's like, wait, this is sinister. Wait, we're starting to hear this. What's going on here? And it's coming from his virtual interactive device. Essentially, it's, without going into it, it's like a Google Home or a Alexis, you know, it's their way of probably getting around like having to pay to actually use those names. So we'll just kind of keep it vague on what kind of device it is. It's a home device, a virtual home device. But regardless, it's talking to him, and it knows so much. It knows about, it says it knows David, it knows Ben's name. They tried tracking down a hacker, but they couldn't, because the hacker is actually really good at what they do. And I thought it was actually kind of neat, because Ben is like, you know, I'm going to track down this hacker and figure out how they did what they did. And, you know, David was like, be careful. He's like, of what? He's like, it's just a hacker. He's like, you don't know what we're dealing with. It's like, yeah, we do. It's a hacker. You know, Ben kind of being like, you're acting crazy, man, thinking there's something more to it. It's like, all it is a hacker. What I thought was kind of neat was the fact that he went to his sister. I love that she kind of got upset. She's like, why is it I'm always in the middle of work and you're bringing your work stuff for me? It's actually kind of neat to see that his sister is just as tech savvy as him, if not more, you know? So they're actually hitting this situation together. But the thing is, it doesn't just stop with the device there. It actually went over to their father's device as well. So it's like, whoa, what's going on here? But it's like, they hacked my phone, and the hack went from my phone to Dad's device. So it's like, we're going to use this as a way to track it back to the hacker and whatnot. So even getting the NSA involved is like, well, why would we get them involved? It's like, because to get them in trouble for what they're doing, you know? So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I am curious to learn more about Ben's story of, like, you know, like I said, because obviously they hinted to it like last episode that his dad is spiritual. So like, why Ben is on such a like, he's so against it. It's like he goes to the far extreme, to the other side of like, I have to. It's like there's something inside him that needs to prove. Maybe because like, maybe it has something to do with their mom, because their dad keeps coming up in conversation, but never anything about their mom. So maybe that's what it's like. All his dad did was believe in that, rather than, because it seems like Ben believes in technology, whereas his dad kind of believed in a more religious route. Maybe that's the type of thing of like, maybe it was like a medicine situation. Mama's sick. You went to praying when you should have been pushing more so for modern medicine, and maybe she didn't get the treatment she wanted. That's me just throwing that in there, because that seems like that could be potentially a story, but we'll see. I could be completely off the marker, and that's fine, but I'm curious to kind of dive into that. But regardless, they end up finding out that it is some ex-employee that didn't get paid like he should have. So he was just screwing with Byron, even getting him to be like, hey, believing that he sold his soul and everything. He was like, oh, he's an idiot. But what was interesting, though, has been, it's like, oh, and then you hacked my phone and then took to my dad's place. And it's like, no, that wasn't me. It's like, no, I stopped days ago. Like, and so it's like, whoa. So all that other stuff wasn't the Sebastian dude. So it's like, what the hell is that? He goes back home, and the voice is talking in a different language, but it says some stuff in English about, oh, the baby or whatever, which her brother is immediately, Ben's like, whoa, what did he mean about a baby? So it's like, either she gave her baby up for adoption, or that's one way to look at it. Another route is maybe she had an abortion. I don't know religiously if that's kind of like against her family or something like that. Or maybe she had a baby out of wedlock or something like that. And like I said, gave it up for adoption. That could be it. And it's like, oh, so-and-so has your baby or something like that. So it's like some deep, dark secrets. Before it's like, hey, the Ben And, David thing is like, okay, you probably Googled him or whatever, but that's probably a secret because that's something not even Ben knew about. He's like, well, what the hell is this about a baby and stuff like that? So it's like, okay, like I said, this show does that thing of like, it seems like, oh, there's a rational explanation, but then it's kind of like, there's definitely a supernatural element to this. The sad thing is at the end of, it's actually kind of a cool thing. It started off cool and then it ended in a sad notion. Is the fact is that Byron was changing. He wasn't as much of an asshole. And even Patty was kind of enjoying it. She's like, I don't know what you guys did, but you did it. You turned everything around. He's actually being extremely good. I think, it's a whole new world now. But obviously a message is saying like that gets sent to Byron being like, hey, hell is only half full. And who knows what other messages were sent to him. So someone else kind of either, there was some demonic presence in this technology that did end up sending him the message, but we see at the end he kills himself. I'm like, whoa. It almost has, I was about to reference a show, but I'm like, that's kind of spoilers for a show that, that's still kind of fresh enough a spoiler that I won't say. But regardless, it just reminded me of something else kind of ending on a bit of a bummer. And I was like, oh, it seemed like a victory, but then it's like, no, it's not. It's, so a very sad way to end that off. He might have been an asshole, but it's still sad that things kind of went down that route. So I guess it's like good people won, evil one, maybe. I guess the score might be. That depends on if you count the rest of the stuff with Leland and Kristen, but we'll get to that soon enough. It turns out that obviously Leland is doing exactly what he was saying. And like I said, immediately picking up with storylines for, I didn't know that actually be something we'd actually see, but one of the cases she worked on, Leland is trying to overturn it. That basically it was something where a boy was going to be tried as an adult, but like Kristen pushed for him not to be because he's only 15. But Leland is pushing for it. And, obviously Kristen wants to kind of bring into question Leland as a, a professional witness. It's kind of not, in the sense of like giving his own diagnosis and stuff like that. But the defense won't even do that because he brings up the fact of the matter is referencing her therapy sessions, which is like, oh, there's supposed to be client privilege there, doctor-client privilege, but it doesn't count because it goes into adding credibility to her diagnosis, whether she's a reliable medical professional that they can, end up talking to. So obviously she's put on a back burner. And obviously this case is, because that's the thing about Kristen, she invests herself in the cases. She talks about the fact is, that, because I guess like her bias could be used against her, like, oh, she sways a certain way because she cares about these people. So it shows that she does put too much of her heart in it. So she's not giving an unbiased opinion. It's kind of, a thing they're kind of leaning into. So Kristen does a smart thing of like trying to convince Leland, like, hey, I got, to speak all this stuff. And it's like, oh, she recorded it. I was like, okay, oh, that's awesome. I was like, something's going to go wrong. I don't know how it's going to, and it does. Only the beginning plays, the rest of it, every time he responds, it's messed up. So it was a bit of a jammer and stuff like that. So she goes to Ben to kind of help with that, but Ben can't undo what was done. So I was like, what do we do? And then Ben suggests making a deep fake. It's like Kristen has a really good memory because she literally she knows the exact words that were spoken. She didn't fudge it. So it's like all we're doing is recreating a conversation that already happened. Obviously, we're just faking it, which obviously it puts Kristen in that lane of like, but this is, isn't unethical. But at the same time, it's not like he's the most unethical person too. And she even says it later on, doing, what did Shakespeare say? To do a little evil, to counter evil, you got to do a little evil in return to kind of do some right, That's me paraphrasing. I'm sure I butchered that. But you get what I'm trying to say. I thought that was kind of neat. And even Leland was kind of like, wait, what? No, that's not my voice. But it's like, dude, it was so good. It's almost kind of like, it's one of those moments you're like, yeah, middle finger to you, Leland. I thought that was kind of pretty neat that Kristen kind of felt good about it. She kind of won. But the fact is, Leland is a spiteful person, and I can see him striking back. Like, this is just round one of many. That basically say, I forgot his exact wording, but basically, essentially kind of your supervillain motive of, this isn't over, you hear me? Type of situation. So I doubt it's far from over. I think it is kind of interesting that David does not know anything about this whole situation because she's trying to keep him out of the dark, because obviously she knows how much this Leland thing is connected to him, which, speaking of David, I would immediately jump to the whole thing of like, okay, maybe he's in, like, it's hard to say because he talked to that other father being like, that other priest being like, hey, I had another vision, which I'm like, but didn't you use drugs? So like, Is that a different situation? I don't think so. Like, is it a type of thing where everyone thinks he has these legit visions, but for him, it's like these visions come true because it's like, yeah, it's a manifestation of him drinking certain things. Because it didn't seem like straight up drugs, but it seems like something specific. Maybe it's kind of like a mushroom or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, I immediately internalized that as kind of like, oh, this is some drugs or something like that. That's something that delved into his past. The second time he saw God and all that. But now this kind of makes me question that, or maybe it's just because not everyone has the full story. Like he only gives like the whole, oh, I had visions, and maybe there's some validity to his visions, or maybe he just leaves out the whole part of, I also got high. So that kind of takes away from it. But maybe even though he's high, I mean, you know, that's the thing. Like people think that when you get high, like there is some like part of your brain that break, or like you break through that level of consciousness and kind of connect with the universe on some level. So, you know, it's for each person to decide what that means. I really wouldn't know where to kind of really place like whether this is just him being high or whether there is some message, or is it somewhere in between where it's a combination of two. I don't know. I'm interested to kind of dive into that, but he does try to interpret his dreams. He's actually a really good artist because the way he was depicting everything from his dream, obviously like Leland being that devil on his shoulder, which is interesting. Like Leland's there as a devil on his shoulders. We're the angel, but I guess it's kind of like you don't need the angel as long as you hold on to God, as long as you believe that evil is not going to get to you, which that in itself I think is a really interesting conversation. Like he had a very in-depth conversation with Kristen I thought was kind of neat. Because he is trying to become a priest and everything. So she brings up the good points of like, what about the scandals? The scandals being everything associated with the church. I'm sure more so like priest and, you know, obviously something Leland brought up at the beginning, like priest and little boys, that whole thing. It's like, you know, obviously that's something to discuss them. It's like, well, how do you feel about homosexuality? It's like, no, I don't stand with a lot of like beliefs where people are against homosexuality. He's like, I don't go down that lane, because for her it's like it's that whole complicated thing of like, why would you choose to be a priest when there's all these complicated things, you know, because it kind of goes against like, it's, you know, you seem like a decent person, and obviously that's why he wants to, because obviously, you know, the church needs more decent good people. So it's kind of like to kind of balance out those who are evil, who do some terrible things, who believe some terrible things, like, you know, believe things that all across the board shouldn't be, you know, he wants to kind of be there to kind of balance that out. Because for him, he talked about the fact is he spent time with 6 Marines. The fact of the matter is that camaraderie, that having each other's back, that dedication to what they were doing. He wanted that. That's why he's pushing for this, because he's never been one, because he's going from one thing to his life, one person in his life to another, to another, to another. He's never just stayed and committed to one thing. And this is probably one of those instances of like, hey, I've committed myself to this, so I'm going to go all the way. Like I said, he's 2 years into his 5-year training to becoming a priest. That was just kind of interesting. And even like, oh, do you have to give up other, you know, even aspects you have to give up, kind of insinuating, you know, the sex aspect, which he's like, you know, when you have to kind of give up, you know, the hardest stuff, basically the harder it is, kind of the more worthwhile it is in the end, that no matter what you have to give up, which is like, you know, he talks about the fact that he enjoys talking to Kristen and she enjoys talking to him. She actually gave him a clue about what he was drawing is actually connected to a, what was it, who was it she was referencing? I'm blanking, but it was like a particular painting, and he looks into it, and on the actual painting there's like a ball in the picture's hand, and like there's these 3 dots. He puts that over the map because he put in some coordinates from his vision as well, his things in Roman numerals, and he puts in that longitude and latitude, and it's New York, and then he connects the points, and one goes to Washington D.C., the other one obviously is on New York, and the other one is Chicago. So there's like some parameter there, kind of like, I mean, isn't, you know, there's the whole devil's triangle thing. I don't know if that's going to play into this or not, but it's like, maybe that's like, it's the tri point of like evil or something like that. Maybe that's what that's supposed to represent. I don't know. I'm interested to kind of dive into this. Like I said, maybe it's, like I said, the whole David thing with the whole vision thing. I don't know what to really think. Like I had my mindset of like, oh, it must mean this, but now this episode kind of got me questioning whether I got that entirely wrong. Maybe he was never a junkie. Maybe this is kind of like that one thing, you know, how does this connect to Sarah and everything? I don't know. Not Sarah, Julia. Where the hell did I get the name Sarah from? Regardless, I'm interested to kind of see where this all ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, what this next case is going to be like, because we've dealt with demonic possession. That wasn't demonic possession. We dealt with a miracle. That wasn't a miracle. But there's still that unanswered aspect of like, what the hell was that on the camera? No one can still answer. There's still this whole aspect of Ben. It's one of those stories, I think it, like I said, I think I might have referenced it specifically for this, or was it something else? The whole X-Files thing of having, I think of where it seems like things lean one way, but then at the end it's like, oh, maybe there was a little bit more to this. I always like that. And it seems it's not just going to be one thing. It seems like every case might lead you being like, I don't know. Especially Leland, because it seems like maybe he is actually a demon, or is he just a manifestation in David's head, like the version that comes to him, or is that actually Leland there kind of messing with him, the devil on his shoulder, or does it just manifest itself like that? Is Leland just a piece of shit human being in general, and it just manifests himself as a demon in David's eyes, or what? Like I said, I'm very interested to kind of dive into this, see where this goes, like what the next case ends up being, because there's at least one more case that Leland was going to like turn over of Kristen, so maybe that's something we'll kind of deal with. I was almost worried about Kristen going down that route with Ben of like using a deep fake, because I was like, oh, that's going to get used against you later on. But for now, it seems like everything's okay. But I think it's that thing of like, maybe it's a slippery road of like, oh, a little wrong, but then you kind of start skirting the line more and more, pushing it back of like, no, it's okay as long as I don't cross the line here. Well, as long as I don't cross the line here, and pushing it back further and further and further, that type of thing. Or like she said, maybe a little wrong to do some right. Either way, I'm curious to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.